Hey everybody, welcome to the Augmented Reality Podcast for the 30th of October 2017. My name is Asheninity. I'm here as always with Subsidian.
Hello.
This is a presentation of the Triple S League. Check out our YouTube channel for game guides, reviews, comedy, music videos, and tons of other stuff. Tons of fun gaming content. Lots of awesome games we've been covering recently. Of course, Cuphead, which I just beat actually yesterday. I beat the final boss. Haven't had as much time to put into it as I'd like just because there's been so many awesome games. Evil Within 2 and the South Park game. So many games, so little time.
It's always this. It's always this time of year, right, with the October.
Oh yeah, October, yeah. Yep, so we've both completed the South Park game now, and I have to say it was certainly a fun experience.
It was a little shorter than I was expecting. Like, I really was hoping to, cram in an 80-hour game, or at least a 60-hour game. I finished it in 24 hours. But I also didn't finish 5 of the side quest things. So there were 5 big achievements that I was missing. What I did, though, is as soon as I finished it, I immediately started a new game. It was so fun to play through the first time, and then the second time was like, now I'm taking my time. It's funnier because I'm pissing off people more. Mostly just Cartman. Dude, come on! Escort missions are the worst. It's like, haha. You have to sit there and you have to watch as I go through everybody's garbage can on this street.
Yep.
So the game itself is brilliant as far as an open world game goes, in the concept of what the South Park game was. They really expanded on that and they made it really, really good. The combat is much more involved
Compared to the first game?
Yeah, in comparison to Stick of Truth, which is good, which is fine. Because
I really liked what they did with the combat. I really liked the system that they set up for that. Turn-based combat set on the grid with, a variety of different things that could happen, the interrupts and objectives where you had to get your characters to a certain area, and there were enemies in the way. There was a lot of variety to it. It wasn't just sort of repetitive over and over. Although the base combat was very fun as well. I found it very repetitive at the beginning, but once I unlocked more characters and there was more variety of enemies to fight and different strategies and things, even the random encounters, I would very rarely try to avoid one of the random encounters when I saw it coming, because the combat was just so fun in that game.
Then the DLC that's coming out. There is some major DLC coming out. Some of it that advances the story. My biggest thing when I got the game was where the hell is Mintberry Crunch? What the? And I saw in one screen there was this lady eating some Mintberry Crunch, and I was like, well, he's clearly here in the game. They didn't delete him from the canon. And then I found out, he's coming in the DLC. So.
Remember Mintberry Crunch? Yeah, I remember.
Oh yeah, and then the member berries too. I was like, okay, well, this is good. I like this direction of the...
Remember the zombies from the last game? Yeah, I remember those from every game.
Yeah, from every game.
No, lots of good humor. Very crude. Don't buy it for your kids. I mean, it's
yeah, no.
It's a very, very adult game. And don't play it if you can't handle one or two very disturbing choices you have to make.
Yeah. The thing that's really interesting, and I got to point this out before we wrap up, is the story in the game is really funny and hilarious when you're playing as a guy.
Mm-hmm.
And then, if you're playing as a girl or dressed as a female, that makes the entire game a lot darker. Overall, it's a lot more darker and creepier in a lot more scenes, like the strip club scene.
Oh,
Playing that through as a girl takes it from wow, this is really creepy and uncomfortable to oh my god.
Yeah, there was a few things in there that I was very surprised they were able to get away with, even being South Park.
On my first playthrough, because I didn't put 2 and 2 together until we got there, and it was and I forgot to change it. I hadn't really found a good costume to wear, a dedicated costume. I was flipping between, on that mission to the strip club, I had flipped between a cute onesie and a handful of other costumes, and I had last experimented with the Dirty Candy costume, which is a kind of a trampy girl's outfit. And then I went to the club in that Dirty Trampy girl's outfit, and I was like, okay, this is now really awkward. This is really awkward. So I ended up sticking with the lower half of the Iron Man suit until you get the Batman suit later on, and then go with the Batman suit and kind of a ninja look.
There was a surprising amount of costume options in
Huge.
The Fractured But Whole, and I was well over halfway, like I was 2/3 of the way through the game before I realized you could change the colors of the costumes and just customize them to your heart's content. And so suddenly all the costumes that I didn't like because I didn't like the color scheme were viable options. So by the end of the game, I got my character looking pretty much exactly the way I wanted.
When you told me this originally, my immediate and first reaction was that scene in Guardians of the Galaxy 2, the one that came out this summer.
Yes, I know.
Is sitting there just like, ha 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 ha. Your deepest, darkest secret was just released. You must feel
so stupid, or something. What does he say? You must be so embarrassed. Yes, I know. And yes, you sent me a YouTube clip of that scene in response.
But anyways,
yes, I know. I mean, I do have a tendency to miss the obvious. But anyway, so yes, you can change the colors to your costumes. It's lots of customization options. Considering you start with just a generic South Park character, you can make yourself look very unique. And I actually really enjoyed that part of the game. I don't usually care so much about costumes and appearance and stuff. So yeah, beat that game this past week and finished Cuphead yesterday, and so I'm getting back into the Evil Within 2 again, which is awesome, just in time for Halloween. Do you get many trick-or-treaters around your place?
No. My place is by far too scary for anybody to approach. So half of it is the generalized location. Then the other half of it is the street going down to the location. And then the last little bit is, those like scenes when you're a kid, you're watching the movies where it's like, the evil house in the distance and the lightning's going off and thunder in the background, and it's like everybody's like, oh my god, that's the scariest place on the planet. Yes, it's sort of like that, except double. So it's most something that most people tend to. I've even seen some door knockers, people that when they come and knock on your door and they're like, hey, we'd like to tell you about, and then enter whatever product, ideology, or concept that they wish to discuss. It's kind of like they don't even consider knocking on the door. So I never have any fear. I have thought about putting little bags of candy way out by the access, but I don't know.
Halloween is a weird time. I mean, you're basically telling your kids to do the exact opposite of the stuff you tell them never to do. What you would
tell them to do.
Take candy from strangers.
Yeah. It's like
run across the street, knock on random doors. Yeah. It's a weird time. One of my kids is going as a mermaid. I don't know where this mermaid kit came from because they've never seen The Little Mermaid, which is somewhat by design. I mean, I know it's the classic tale of, the rebellious teenager who completely changes who she is and completely rebels against everything that is safe and or sane and makes a deal with the Dark Witch. And this results in her living happily ever after. But,
And that's not necessarily something you want. Yeah. but
anyway.
But hold on. Have they seen H2O just add water or one of the other H2O series?
No. I think there was a My Little Pony thing recently where they became mermaids or something like that. But
anyway. Okay, then that would do it, yeah.
Today's podcast, by the way, brought to you by MMOGamerStore.com, your source for alpha and beta keys for lots of upcoming games. Check them out. You can get keys there for alphas, betas that are difficult to get into. Often these things are just kind of a lottery, luck of the draw as to whether or not you can get into them. But there are keys available on MMOGamerStore.com, so go check them out. So there's been a lot of talk this week about whether or not single-player gaming experiences as a whole is coming to an end. There's been a lot of speculation about whether or not single player is dead in terms of game development. Obviously, we've seen the success of some massive multiplayer titles and then the cancellation of some single player titles recently. And the big catalyst for this whole discussion was the closing of Visceral, which was a subsidiary of EA, Visceral, of course, was famous for the Dead Space games, and also they were working on Star Wars 1313, which was famously canned when Disney acquired LucasArts a few years ago, and they canned Star Wars 1313 because the premise was just too dark, apparently. And that was very sad, because apparently it was very, very close to completion.
Yeah.
And now it's just been stuck on a shelf somewhere.
There's been almost like a dozen, probably more than that we even know of. But Star Wars games have been ruthlessly canceled consistently in the history of gaming development for ages.
Even in the pre-Disney days?
Oh, yeah. Like, nonstop. Games that were supposed to come out never came out. Games that were being worked on and then were canceled at the last minute. LucasArts had a horrible reputation for just canceling projects, like whatever, moving on to something else. And unfortunately, what we see here with this one, so the big thing is that, as you know, you have this other game called Anthem coming out, which is also by EA, which is kind of an open world adventure kind of thing. Much more like Destiny than it is like an open world linear-ish RPG, which apparently is what the Star Wars game was.
Actually, I hadn't actually mentioned this yet, but if anyone's not aware, at the time that Visceral was closed, it was working on a large open world single-player Star Wars game codenamed Ragtag, and everything I read about this game, apparently it was supposed to be awesome.
Well, and it had some amazing people behind it too. Like the lady who helped lead the Uncharted series. It's just frustrating because this is another like story-driven Star Wars game that we're not getting. And the reasons for it are really, really, really obvious now. We've got Anthem, which is, a heavy multiplayer, but still focusing heavily on story. Then you have the new Battlefront game, which is mostly focusing on multiplayer with a light dusting of story. And then this game was supposed to be the single player experience. And EA just like, yeah, we're just going to close this down, and we're going to take whatever hit that they took on the loss of all the work that they'd done up to this point. They've kept some of the resources as far as like some of the graphics and the basic engine, but they're redesigning the game from the ground up, which means that they have essentially taken several $1 million, probably close to 80, and thrown it into a barrel fire. That is essentially what they've done here. And this is not new. When LucasArts sold Star Wars to Disney canned 1313, which at the time was like rumored to have cost well over $100 million, probably even closer to like $200 million. And they took a look at that in one business meeting and said, yeah, that's not really our brand. And then they killed it. It's like, okay, yeah, your canceled games now are reaching the 1 billion mark. I understand that this is a cost of doing business, but at the same time, you guys are so wasteful. Like,
it just goes to show the atrocious amount of money they have to play with.
Visceral was a really good company. Yes, they were forced to do some pretty dumb decisions in Dead Space 3 that I do not agree with, as far as the whole microtransaction thing goes, and the story was getting maybe a little weak, but they didn't need to be. They didn't deserve to be shut down for that. They've done other stuff, and this is really sad. Now they EA says, oh yeah, we're taking those employees. No, they didn't take all of them, not even by a long shot. Plus, on top of it, they moved to Canada, and some of their employees not necessarily able to make that move. So you kind of sit back and you kind of watching and like, are they just shutting down studios and then absorbing their talent? A lot of the higher end talent just gets absorbed by EA. Now, this has been done so often that it's starting to become, well, is this a new strategy? Like, I mean, they did it with Mass Effect Andromeda with Bioware, and now we're looking at Anthem and we're saying, is EA setting Bioware up for failure? Just to absorb their best or to absorb their IPs and then to shut the company down. And that's what some of the new fear is.
Is that really profitable, though? I suppose if you're absorbing the high-end talent into your company, I mean, obviously that's a good thing for the company.
And the IPs. The IPs are the biggest thing.
But they already own the IPs, though. don't they?
Well, they do and they don't in a certain way. And it always makes things a little bit muddier when you have somebody who's got a valid claim to the IP down the road and some other stuff. And maybe in the contract it's like, when the partnership is dissolved, we'll buy your IPs for, net its value worth at such and such a time. Well, if they ruin the IP and they make it worthless, they save themselves like probably 80% of what they might have paid out if it was a top end thing at the time. Of course, that's conspiratorial and thinking too much on it. But I can tell you that some Bioware employees are not sitting secure in their feeling of where EA is taking them.
Well, you watch the closing of Visceral and then other studios going all the way back to Maxis. I remember that was the big thing in the news. Yeah, I wouldn't be feeling too comfortable if I was an employee of Bioware right now.
Now, on top of that, to get back to the main thing, EA says they're done with single-player experiences. They're done with the single-player game. The game that you pick up, you play once, and then you're done with it. They're interested in making money off of you. They're interested in making money off of you on that product again and again and again and again.
This ties back into the conversation we had a couple weeks ago about loot boxes.
Yeah, loot boxes and microtransactions.
Microtransactions, there's tons of money to be made on that. The No reported that a certain individual spent over $15,000 on a particular game. There's tons of money to be made in microtransactions over and above the original cost of the game, although a lot of them are going free to play now because people spend so much money in the microtransactions. I don't think that's a bad business model overall, but there's a lot of speculation.
I just wish they made it worth it.
I'm not a fan of loot boxes, but I'm not opposed to microtransactions. In general.
I'm not against microtransactions either. In fact, the Fractured Butthole from South Park, it had several little unlockable stuff, like new costumes and stuff like that. I do like the way that Ubisoft does it in this particular case. You can earn that stuff within the game.
Right.
That currency that you use to unlock the thing. You can buy it, but you can also earn that in-game, and I think that's a smart move. And then they charge it for the DLC too, which as long as it's good, I don't have a problem putting out for it. I would not have a problem putting out $5 or $10 for another 10, 20 hours. South Park, unfortunately, has been cut down to like 10 episodes a season now, which is really, really, really short. I really don't like that. I wish it was at least 12 or 15. Same thing with Rick and Morty. It's too short. I want them to extend that to like at least do 12. 12 is a good episode number. 24 would be better, obviously, but maybe that's too much for some people. But honestly, if South Park wanted to pump out an extra, every 3 months, here's a new, story-driven thing in the game and that ties to, one of their more recent episodes or whatever, I'd pay for that. I would 100% pay for that as long as I get a full game the first time. Right. I'm okay with spending money on top of it. I'm really okay. I've said this nonstop. I am okay with new costumes and stuff like that because typically, and this is very true, typically you only, like most games, you don't even get a chance to change your costume. Like you've got one costume throughout the duration of the entire game, and that's it. Then you have games like Skyrim and Fallout where you can mix and match your outfits and stuff like that. That's all fine. That's all great. But when you have something like that and then you add more things that you can buy, I'm okay with that as long as it's worth it and as long as it's not stretching. There has been some games that I've seen, and this is mostly like the little derpy phone games where it's like, hey, buy this costume for $32. It's like, oh, great. Yeah, just a single costume for one character for $32. No, thank you. Oh, wait. Is that a G-string I see? Well, maybe in that. No. Keep it under $5, all right? Like, crying out loud.
Yep.
A costume I feel for a character in a game is worth about $2. I'm okay with spending that, but yeah, in this particular case, I think EA has decided that they want to have a game have some kind of multiplayer, so that you have to make an account, so that you have to utilize an account to play the game, which means that you cannot turn around and sell the game.
Right.
If you have a single player linear story game that that has no multiplayer functionality, you can take that game and you can sell it to somebody else. Easy peasy.
Games as a service is the term that I've heard that EA is really focusing on. Games as a service, something that people will keep coming back to and playing indefinitely, and that they can monetize indefinitely. And the thing is that you can do that with multiplayer games. You cannot do that as easily with single-player titles. So this has led to a lot of speculation about, is the industry moving away from single-player, period. And this puzzles me a little bit, because yes, we are seeing this with EA. That seems to be the direction that they're going very strongly, but I don't see that in the industry as a whole right now. Bethesda's showing no signs of slowing down with their single-player experiences. Ubisoft has a lot of multiplayer titles, but they're also putting out tons of single-player titles. You look at games like Cyberpunk 2077 that's coming out, which is going to have a seamless multiplayer component, but is very heavily focused on the single-player story experience as well. So I guess it leads me to question, where is this speculation coming from? I mean, it was even, on The Know, which, by the way, shout out to The Know. We got a mention on their show last week. That was pretty awesome. They talked about our Cyberpunk 2077 leaks and mentioned our channel. That was really awesome. Also the Mad Queen, who worked with us on those. But anyway, where's the speculation coming from in the industry as a whole? There's been an explosion of multiplayer, obviously, but it doesn't look like the single-player experience is going away in general.
Well, I think that the big studios are pulling away. They want to find some way of adding some kind of a microtransaction, if not in the game, then maybe in a spin-off game. And we saw this work exceptionally well with The Witcher and with Fallout 4. In The Witcher, you had this game called Gwent. They released Gwent as a game, and it's something that you can spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars on because it is a collectible thing with microtransactions. Would Gwent sell on its own without the Witcher series there present at all? Probably not. Same thing with Fallout 4 and Fallout Shelter. Would Fallout Shelter have been as big as it was if it didn't come along with a big AAA main game? No, I think that if they had said, yeah, we're done making single-player driven experience stories, instead we're giving you this game called Fallout Shelter, where you make your own base and send out guys on missions and stuff.
Yeah, no.
I think the population would have revolted at that.
Exactly. Well, this is kind of my point, because like you just said, those sort of mobile game experiences, or like the in-game mini-games like Gwent, those are nothing without their single-player counterpart AAA games that really bolsters the IP that gets people into the smaller minigame, which people then spend a ton of money on. So for that reason, I don't see them getting away from the single-player experience because, like you said, Gwent and Fallout Shelter would be nothing without The Witcher and Fallout 4.
Yeah.
Because you can't build a solid IP on these small minigames. Like, the Fallout IP, you need that open world experience and that story. Otherwise, Fallout Shelter, like, people would be like, okay, what is this? This is a I'm in some underground bunker, whoop-de-doo. Like, without the surrounding lore, it doesn't have nearly as much meaning.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to spend hours learning the lore for a mobile phone game, right? Like, that's just not going to happen. Like, we did dozens of hours of podcasts when our channel first started on the Fallout lore because it was this big AAA experience that you could have.
Yeah, because it was there. You don't have that build up for most of these smaller games. So these little mobile like money cashers. I feel ultimately that this is going to hurt the industry if they decide that big linear games are not something that they want. Now, they have specified that this Star Wars game that was canceled, the Visceral one, was far more linear than it was supposed to be. That there was very little open world feel to the game. As in, like, once you finished up in an area, you could never go back to that area. It was not something that was built for exploration and discovery. It was just pushing a narrative story, linear, and then that's it. So if that is true, then I can see why they decided, okay, here's what we're going to do instead. We're going to, rebuild it as an open world game. If that's the main reason why they canceled it, then I can actually get on board with that because I don't think that they needed to shut the studio down, but I definitely want more open world games. Like South Park's open world, you can go, there's very few limitations in where you can go when. 2 hours into it, I could go pretty much anywhere I wanted, except for Canada. You can't go to Canada in South Park. Those bastards built the wall.
Funny. Oh man!
And you can't get past it. And it's apparently it's great on the other side. And that's just.
I don't know. In my opinion, that was the funniest part of the game when you go up.
It was.
When you go up north, and you just find this random area in the middle that just looks like a wilderness, and you keep walking and walking, and it keeps shrinking and shrinking and shrinking until you're this tiny. You're like a tenth the size that you were before as it's zooming out, and then suddenly there's this massive wall. It's like, welcome to Canada, and there's this guy sitting on the wall. Hey, buddy, you made it to Canada. You can't come in.
I find it hilarious how they view Canadians.
It's so ridiculous. They completely got away from any Canadian stereotypes and just kind of made up their own thing. It's really weird, but really funny at the same time. I laughed so hard at that part. I started throwing firecrackers at him and stuff. And your little firecrackers won't get you through this wall.
I spent probably about 30 minutes there trying to going over every inch of the entire map with my character, pressing buttons, and then went over it again with the farts and the firecrackers, and couldn't find a single thing. So I was like, okay, well, I'm done here. Screw you, Canada.
It was a gag. I was hoping it would be part of the story, but no, it's just a gag they put in the game.
In the first game, when you went to Canada, it became an old school JRPG, which was really funny.
Oh yeah,
and I was really hoping for them to do that again, but no. So, anyways,
I just wanted to add, Visceral, you were mentioning, you didn't think they needed to shut the studio down, but there was more to it than just the game.
Yeah,
there's a Kotaku article, which was the writer interviewed a bunch of former Visceral employees, all anonymously. And they all seemed to agree that it was sunk by, or the game was sunk by a number of factors, including a lack of resources, a vision that was too ambitious for its budget, a difficult game engine, a director who clashed with staff, a studio located in one of the most expensive cities in the world.
Yeah, it doesn't help.
A reputation for toxicity, and multiple conflicts between Visceral and EA. So it sounds like there were, these are the reasons why the game sunk, but it sounds like there's more to it there than just... we had some difficulties with this one game. It sounds like there was more going on there than just that.
Yeah. So we'll see where it goes from here. It potentially builds a big reaction for Bioware and Anthem. If Anthem does not do well, I think the studio will be in major trouble, major trouble. And from the outset, you can look at it and say, well. A lot of these decisions that were made by EA recently really helped feed into that as a big problem. I don't think that they're necessarily wanting it to fail, but I think that they've set in motion a plan where if Anthem does amazing, then that's good. And it's good for the company, it's good for the bottom line, it's good for everybody all around. If the game is garbage, then it's really good for EA, and it's not good for anybody else.
Except, is it good for EA? Because I really think that they are harming their reputation.
I think they don't care, and I think they don't think that fans care. I think they're wrong.
They're very wrong. They're growing a reputation for being a company that causes their subsidiaries to produce crap and then shut them down.
Yeah.
Like Bioware Montreal.
At the whole time making themselves bigger and bigger and having more direct control over everything. Which would be great if they actually, had a reputation for making good products, but they don't. And
that's the thing.
A lot of their own EA games are not as good as they could be, and they take a lot of shortcuts.
When I'm looking at a new game, and then I see, it's published by EA, I have that moment of, let me see what else is available. I'm going to be hesitant to drop a lot of money on Anthem for that reason. So it's going to hurt them in the long run. It really is. But anyway, that's what we think about all this. What do you think? Let us know in the comments below what you think of the Visceral closing, and does this affect your opinion of EA at all? Positively or negatively, or does it not? Will you keep buying their products regardless?
Mm-hmm.
Any other thoughts on that or anything else we talked about? Please let us know in comments, and We certainly appreciate you subbing to this channel and liking this video if you enjoyed it and if you appreciate this content. We also invite you to check out our GawkBox page where you can support this channel just by installing apps on your phone and playing games. It's a really neat, new, innovative system for tipping content creators that it's still in beta, but it's something we're definitely trying out. Gawkbox.com/the League. We've also got a Patreon, patreon.com/the League. We've recently updated our patron rewards. Thank you so much for listening. On behalf of Subsidian, my name is Ashenity for the S League. We will talk to you later.